It came through my phone at 11:47 p.m., that sharp, mechanical screech that cuts through whatever you're doing and yanks your attention, whether you want it or not. An Amber Alert. Normally, I'd glance at the description, feel a passing unease, and move on. But this one felt different. The message said the suspect was last seen within 3 miles of my location. A late-model blue pickup truck, dented on the passenger side, license plate partially obscured. The accompanying details about the child, a 7-year-old boy, were vague. Too vague. No picture, no name. I told myself it was just the system acting fast, putting out what little they had. Still, I locked my doors, checked the windows, and convinced myself that was enough. I was alone in the apartment, and I liked to think I could handle being alone. The air felt heavier after the alert. Every creak in the building seemed to stretch longer. The refrigerator's hum seemed too loud, like it was trying to cover up something else. I put on a movie, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. It was during a quiet scene with a lull in dialogue that I heard it. Breathing. Soft, slow, deliberate. It wasn't coming from the hallway, or the living room, or anywhere a person would normally stand. It was coming from under my bed, and in that moment, I realized 2 things. 1, that my front door was still locked, and 2, that whoever was under there had been in my apartment long before the alert went out. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my family, not my friends, not even the cops when they came knocking afterward. And it's not because I'm trying to hide something. It's because I know how it sounds. I know how I sound. You've probably heard stories like this before, half-whispered confessions from people who are either lying for attention or have been awake too long to think straight. But this isn't a joke. I'm not making this up. I just need someone to listen. I think you might be the kind of person who understands strange things, the kind of person who won't immediately tell me I'm insane. I've been holding this inside for so long that it's starting to eat me alive. And I can't sleep more than 2 hours at a time without waking up in a cold sweat. Sometimes I still hear the slow, measured breathing, like someone lying perfectly still, but not asleep. You know how the mind plays tricks on you when you're tired. You start hearing the hum of the fridge like it's whispering. You see shadows where there shouldn't be any. You start to doubt everything. But this wasn't in my head. I know it WASN. Single quotes T. It started with an Amber Alert. My phone buzzed in the middle of the night, jolting me awake. I didn't even know why I checked it. Probably just instinct. You see those messages all the time. Some car, some license plate, some name you'll forget in the morning. Only this one felt different. This one was for my area. The words burned themselves into my eyes before I could even blink them away. Suspect last seen on foot. Possibly armed. Consider it dangerous. Last sighted near my street name. And the thing is, I live in the middle of nowhere. My street is basically a long, twisting road that cuts through woods for miles before you hit the highway. No one walks out here. Not unless they're lost, or unless they're looking for somewhere to hide. I sat there in bed, staring at the screen. My brain was telling me it was fine, just lock the doors, double-check the windows, and go back to sleep. But my body wouldn't listen. It was like my muscles had frozen. My phone screen dimmed out, but I didn't put it down. I just kept replaying the last part of that alert in my mind. Nearby, armed, dangerous. Every creak of the house seemed louder. Every gust of wind through the trees sounded like footsteps. I told myself I was being paranoid. That was when I heard it. At first I thought it was the sound of my own breathing echoing back at me. You know how you can almost trick yourself into hearing your own heartbeat? But then I realized no, it was too slow, too steady, and it wasn't coming from in front of me. It was coming from beneath me. From under the bed. You've probably already got that creeping feeling down your spine right now. The one that makes you want to pull your feet up off the floor. That's exactly how I felt. Like something in me had already recognized the truth before my mind could catch up. I didn't move. I didn't dare move. My mouth went dry, and my ears felt hot. I strained to hear, and there it was again, long, slow breaths, almost deliberate. Not asleep, not scared, just waiting now. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I jump up? Why didn't I run? But that's not how fear works when it's real. When it's the kind of fear that slides cold fingers around your spine and presses on your lungs. You don't think about action. You think about survival. I shifted my weight as quietly as I could and reached for my phone again. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until my vision started to swim. I wanted to call 911, but the thought of speaking or making any sound made my stomach twist. Whoever it was under there, I had this awful feeling they'd been there a while. Maybe they'd been listening to me sleep. I don't know how long I sat there like that, staring into the dark. The breathing was faint, but it didn't stop. I thought about getting up slowly, making it to the door. But the bedroom floor creaks in two specific spots. I know exactly where they are because I've stepped on them 100 times. If I made a noise, even the tiniest one, would they grab my ankle before I made it 2 steps? The thought of that hand shooting out from the darkness, I couldn't. I just couldn't. Minutes stretched like hours. My phone screen lit up again. A new notification. Another Amber Alert update. Same suspect. Still nearby. Still on foot. I felt my stomach lurch when I realized that nearby probably meant right here. I wanted to tell someone, to text a friend, anyone, but the glow of my phone felt like a spotlight. If they saw it, they'd know I was awake. Have you ever had that feeling where you know something is watching you, even if you can't see it? That's what it was like. My skin felt prickly all over. I knew they were still under there, still breathing, still waiting. I could picture them perfectly in my mind, face pressed to the carpet, eyes open, smiling. I wanted to vomit. I don't know if you've ever been truly trapped, but there's this moment when your brain just stops trying to figure out what to do next. Instead, you focus on the tiniest things. I remember staring at the baseboard along the wall, noticing the way the paint had chipped near the corner. I remember counting my own heartbeats, trying to match them to the breathing underneath. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't sync them up. They were always just slightly off, like whoever was under there was controlling it, slowing it down on purpose. I'm telling you this because, well, because I can't tell anyone else. If I tell the cops, they'll just shrug and say, I should have called sooner. If I tell my family, they'll think I've finally cracked from being alone too much. But you may believe me. Maybe you've heard breathing in the dark before, when you know no one's supposed to be there. If you have, then you already know why I didn't look, why I still haven't looked. And before you even think about asking, no, I'm not making this up. I wish to God I was. Because the worst part isn't that they were under my bed that night. The worst part is that I still get Amber Alerts sometimes. And every time one pops up, I swear I hear that breathing again. So promise me something if you ever hear slow, patient breaths where they shouldn't be. Don't check. Don't try to prove it's nothing. Just get out. And whatever you do, don't look under the bed. You know how some places just feel wrong before you can explain why. I don't mean the kind of wrong where the furniture's ugly or the roof leaks. I mean wrong in a way that's harder to put into words, like your body knows something before your mind catches up. That was my first impression of the cabin. It sat alone, deep in a wedge of pine forest that seemed to close in on itself the further you drove. The trees out there didn't sway much in the wind. They stood rigid, towering so high that their jagged tops disappeared into low, heavy clouds. The sky was the color of ash. I'd lost cell service almost half an hour before I caught my first glimpse of the place, and by then, the narrow strip of cracked asphalt I'd been following barely qualified as a road. The listing had called it rustic, which was probably the most generous lie I've ever seen in print. Up close, the cabin didn't just look old, it looked forgotten. The wood siding was gray and splintered, the grain warped and strange. uneven patterns that almost looked like faces if you stared too long. Moss clung stubbornly to the base, creeping up the porch posts like it was trying to swallow them. The porch itself sagged so deeply at the center that the boards groaned under my weight before I even reached the door. The windows were narrow and uneven, set too deep into the walls. The glass wasn't clear. It had that rippled look you get from panes that are older than electricity. When the sun caught them at an angle, the light bent in strange ways, throwing shadows across the floor that didn't quite match the shapes that should have been casting them. The front door was crooked in its frame, leaning slightly to the left, with a brass handle dulled to a brownish-green patina. The roof shingles curled upward at the edges, each one catching what little light there was, almost like scales. When I arrived, I figured the unease I felt was just from being somewhere so far removed from people. But the locals hadn't helped. There's only one town anywhere near the cabin, if you can even call it a town. Just a single gas station, a diner that smells permanently of burned coffee, and a general store where the shelves are mostly fishing lures, canned goods, and batteries. When I stopped there to grab a few last-minute supplies, I made the mistake of mentioning the cabin to the woman at the register. She froze mid-scan. Her eyes flicked toward the man stocking shelves in the corner, and something passed between them, not quite fear, but not exactly surprising either. The man asked, "Up on Miller's Road?" I nodded. He didn't answer right away, just kept looking at me with this dull, unblinking stare. "Things tend to stick around up there," he finally said. His voice was flat, but his meaning wasn't. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the register beeped, and the woman shoved my change into my palm without another word. It was clear the conversation was over. The first odd thing I noticed after moving in wasn't dramatic. Not yet. I unpacked my bag in the upstairs bedroom, set my watch on the nightstand, and went to the kitchen to make tea. The kitchen was crooked, like the whole room had been built at a slight angle, and the single overhead bulb flickered every time I walked under it. When I came back upstairs, my watch had stopped. At first I didn't think much of it. The battery was old. But when I glanced at the wall clock in the kitchen, it had stopped too. Same time. 3:07 p.m. that night, I woke to a strange hush. Out in the woods, you expect noise, crickets, owls, the occasional wind through the trees. But this was different. It wasn't quiet, because nothing was moving. It was quiet like the air itself was holding its breath. On the second morning, while washing my face in the bathroom, I caught something in the mirror. It wasn't behind me, not exactly. More like in the reflection itself. For a split second, the mirror didn't show the bathroom at all. It showed something darker. The walls in that brief glimpse were rough wood instead of painted plaster. And there was a figure standing where my reflection should have been. Not moving, not blinking. Just there. I spun around so fast my neck popped, but of course, there was nothing. When I looked back, the mirror was normal again. My own pale, startled face staring back at me. I kept telling myself I was just jumpy, that I wasn't used to this level of isolation. But the cabin had a way of making its presence known in small, deliberate ways. There were the birds, for example. The first few mornings, I noticed that they never seemed to land on the roof or the porch railing. They'd circle overhead, even settle in nearby branches, but they'd never cross some invisible boundary around the house. Then, on the third day, I woke up to find dead leaves scattered across the floor inside the living room. No broken windows, no open doors, just dry, brittle leaves as if the forest had somehow reached in during the night. The air inside the cabin always seemed cooler than it should have been, even with the heater running. And no matter how many times I swept, there was always a fine layer of dust on the floorboards the next morning, like the place had been sitting empty for decades. The attic door, a square panel in the hallway ceiling with a string hanging down, bothered me the most. I hadn't opened it. I didn't want to open it. But some mornings, I'd find the string swaying slightly, like someone had just pulled it and let go. The worst, though, was the feeling. You know when you can sense someone watching you, even when you can't see them. It was like that, but constant. I'd be reading, or washing dishes, or lying in bed, and I'd feel the weight of my eyes. Sometimes from the corner of the room, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes from under the bed. I should have left. I know that now. But back then, I told myself I was imagining it. That the silence, the shadows, the strange stillness of the forest were all just tricks of an overstimulated mind, finally forced to slow down. But the cabin knew I wasn't leaving, and I swear I was glad. The second night was when I started keeping the lantern beside my bed. Not because I was afraid of the dark, at least that's what I told myself, but because I kept waking to the sense that something was leaning over me, studying my face. Have you ever had that feeling? That split-second certainty that if you opened your eyes, someone would be inches from you. I didn't want to see that, not in the moonless dark of this cabin. It began with the knocking, faint at first, so light it could have been the wooden beams expanding in the cold. A hollow, polite knock 3 times, pause, then 3 times again. It came from somewhere near the back door. I didn't get up. I told myself it was probably just the wind making the shutters rattle. But the sound wasn't random. It was measured, intentional. I woke again around 3 a.m. to the same knock, but closer this time. Still 3 taps. Still a pause. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling, counting the beats between them. Eventually, it stopped, but when I rolled over, my phone left on the nightstand was lit up. The screen said no service, but the flashlight was on. I hadn't touched it. By the third night, the knocks had a rhythm to them. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. Always at night. Always, when the air felt still enough to hear the creak of the floorboards under my own heartbeat. This time, I forced myself to look out the window, pulling the curtain back just enough. The yard was empty, but in the reflection of the glass, I thought I saw someone standing in the corner of the room, behind me. When I turned, nothing. That morning, I found the back door ajar. The old brass deadbolt was still in the locked position, but the door stood open by at least 6 inches. There was frost on the floor, just inside, glittering in the weak daylight. My breath came out in clouds, though the fire had burned steadily all night. I closed the door hard, double-checked the lock, and tried to tell myself it was some kind of warped wood trick. The dreams began the following night. In them, I would hear my name drawn out in a whisper so soft it could almost be mistaken for the wind. It wasn't the voice of someone I knew, but it carried this awful familiarity, like a song you forgot you'd heard as a child. In the dream, the voice would tell me to get up. It would tell me there was something I needed to see, and every time, when I opened my eyes in the dream, I was no longer in bed. I was standing in the kitchen of the cabin. The strangest part, when I woke in the morning, small things would be different in the kitchen. The chair under the window would be pulled out slightly. The salt shaker would be lying on its side. Once, I found the lantern I kept in my bedroom sitting right in the center of the table. By the 5th night, it wasn't just knocks and dreams. I started to hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate ones, moving across the upstairs hallway. But here's the thing, the cabin didn't have an upstairs hallway, just the attic. And the attic, according to the landlord, had been nailed shut decades ago. I went to check, flashlight in hand. The narrow stairs leading to the attic door groaned under my weight, each step sounding like it might give way. When I reached the top, the door was exactly as described. Warped wood, thick layers of old paint, nails driven in, like the final seal on a coffin. I pressed my ear to it. The footsteps stopped. That same night, I woke to find the front door wide open. I'm talking full gaping open, cold air pouring in open. The rug just inside had shifted, as if something had been dragged over it. I closed the door with shaking hands, but my eyes kept flicking to the woods beyond. Even though it was pitch black, I swore I could make out shapes moving just past the tree line, tall. Too tall for a person, The air in the cabin seemed heavier after that, thick, like breathing underwater. Both the old one on the mantle and the battery-powered one I'd brought began to stop in the middle of the night. Always at 3:14 a.m., no ticking, no movement, just frozen. Then, when morning came, they would start again, without me touching them. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of furniture scraping against the floor. The chair in my bedroom was moving. It wasn't being picked up or knocked over. It was being slowly dragged across the floor toward my bed. The sound was like nails across my spine. I sat up, ready to shout, but the movement stopped instantly. The chair sat there, halfway between the wall and the foot of my bed. I didn't sleep after that. The whispers in my dreams grew more insistent. They began describing things that would happen the next day. Small things, but always right. You'll break a glass. The kettle will boil dry. You'll cut your hand. And every time, those things happened exactly as promised. The most unsettling was the morning, it whispered. You'll see me in the reflection. That day, while washing my hands in the small bathroom, I caught movement in the mirror. It wasn't behind me. It was in the glass itself, something dark, hunched, watching with the stillness of a predator. When I turned, the bathroom was empty. But when I looked back at the mirror, the water in the sink was trembling, as though something unseen had touched it. I started keeping every door locked, even inside the cabin. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see someone standing there. The sensation of being watched was no longer occasional, it was constant, pressing at the back of my skull. Then came the night of the whispers outside my bedroom door. Not in dreams, not in my head. Real soft voices, 2 of them, speaking in low, urgent tones I couldn't understand. They weren't trying to hide. They wanted me to hear them. I sat in bed, clutching the lantern, listening to the slow scrape of bare feet across the wooden floor. The next morning, every door in the cabin was standing open. The front door, the back door, even the cabinets in the kitchen. Every drawer pulled out, every cupboard empty, and in the middle of the floor, carved into the wood, were 3 letters, OS. I didn't know if it was meant to be a word, or if the rest of it was missing. That's when I stopped pretending it could all be explained. Something was in that cabin with me, and it was getting bolder. I need you to understand something before I tell you this part. Up until now, everything I've described, the knocking, the shifting furniture, the dreams that bled into waking life, it all felt vague, wrong, yes, terrifying, absolutely. But there was still a part of my mind trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe the cabin was just old, creaking under the weight of time. But what I found next stripped away every single excuse I'd been clinging to. It happened 2 nights after the dream with the voice telling me to open the door. I woke just before dawn, that liminal time when the air feels heavier, like it's holding its breath. My phone useless without a signal read for 13 a.m. I wasn't planning on getting up, but something had been scratching at the edge of my mind for hours, even in my sleep. A sound, a rhythm. At first, I thought it was the wind rattling something loose in the floorboards. But the noise wasn't coming from above. It was underneath me, beneath the bed. I got down on my knees, my hands flat on the cold wood, and pressed my ear to the floor. The sound was faint, but deliberate, like someone moving something heavy or carving. I don't know why I pulled at the corner of the rug. Maybe because it looked slightly crooked, like it had been nudged back into place in a hurry. But when I peeled it back, I saw a square cut in the floorboards. Maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, with a crude iron ring screwed into the center. A hatch. I swear to you, I had never noticed it before. It took every ounce of nerve I had to pry it open. The hinges screamed softly, the sound muffled, as though it didn't want to wake something. A breath of stale, metallic air rose from the darkness below, like the inside of a forgotten tomb. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, landing on something about 3 feet down a wooden crate. warped and stained from age. I lowered myself onto the beams beneath the floor and wrestled it up into the room. The crate was heavier than it looked. The lid was nailed shut, but the wood had splintered over time, and I managed to pry it open with a loose piece of metal from my backpack. Inside, wrapped in rotting cloth, was a leather-bound journal. The cover was cracked, the edges chewed by time. I opened it carefully, and that's when I realized my hands were trembling. The first few pages were written in an old looping script. Dates, names, weather reports. It almost read like a farmer's almanac. But then, about 20 pages in, the handwriting changed. It became frantic, uneven. The entries stopped listing the weather and began describing things. It waits in the trees when the sun goes down. I hear it whispering my name. If the door is not locked before the third knock, it will enter. It wears my wife's face when it wants to speak. There were dozens of entries like that, each one describing nights filled with knocking, voices outside, objects being moved. Some mentioned seeing a shape in the mirror that wasn't their own. Others said clocks stopped at exactly 3:33 a.m. I flipped forward until I found the last complete entry, dated nearly 60 years ago. If you are reading this, you must keep the door locked. You must never let it inside. And above all, if it speaks to you, do not answer. Do not acknowledge it. It can only take what you offer freely. My mouth went dry. I was about to close the book when I noticed faint indentations on the next page, as if someone had written something and then torn it out. But the impressions remained in the paper. I tilted the journal under the flashlight and saw words scratched into the fibers like ghostly echoes. It read, "It's already here." I didn't realize until later that there had been a second thing in that crate. Beneath the journal, a bundle of yellowed photographs tied together with twine. I hesitated, but I couldn't help myself. The top photo was of the cabin. It looked exactly the same, only newer fresh wood, paint still clinging to the boards. In the window, just behind the glass, was a figure. Not a person. Not really. It was tall, thin, its limbs too long, and its head slightly tilted, like it was curious. No features, just the suggestion of a face, like someone had smudged charcoal where eyes and a mouth should be. The next photo showed the cabin again, but closer, the figure now pressed against the window. Then another, where it seemed to be standing inside, behind a man I assumed was the owner. The last photo was the worst. It was a shot of the bedroom, the very room I was standing in. The figure was under the bed, right where I had been sleeping. I dropped the photos and stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The journal slipped from my hand, the pages fanning open as though it wanted me to see something else. My eyes caught on a sentence scrawled in the margin of an earlier page, almost like an afterthought. It hides until you notice it. That's how it knows you're ready. That's when the floorboard beneath my feet creaked, not from my weight, but from something shifting below. I froze. The air in the room felt different, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. And then again, I heard a sound of dragging something heavy closer this time. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly I was shoving the crate back into the hatch, slamming it shut, pulling the rug over it, as though that could undo what I'd just done. But it was too late. I had read the words. I had seen its face. And worst of all, I had acknowledged it. I don't remember deciding to leave. I just remember the moment when sitting still was no longer an option, when the air in the cabin became so thick with dread that every inhale felt like breathing in someone else's breath. The knocking had stopped hours ago, but that was almost worse. The silence was weighty, unnatural, as if it had been pressed into the walls themselves. Every creak in the floorboards beneath me made my skin crawl. I felt like the cabin was listening. I grabbed my coat, my keys, my phone, even though I knew there was still no signal, and stepped outside. The cold hit me instantly, sharp enough to sting, but I didn't care. I just wanted distance from the place. The forest was darker than it should have been for that hour. Not nighttime dark, but the kind of darkness that bends light away from itself. My flashlight's beam seemed swallowed whole, the way water swallows ink. I walked fast at first, following the narrow dirt path that led away from the cabin. The crunch of frost under my boots was my only comfort. But after 10 minutes, I noticed something odd. The path wasn't changing. The same crooked birch tree on my left, the same fallen log on my right, again and again. At first, I thought I was looping in circles without realizing it. But my footprints in the frost, I swear to you, they kept going forward. It was the world that was looping, not me. The deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to press in. The trees tilted toward me, their bare branches like skeletal fingers reaching. The air was colder now, but I was sweating, my heart pounding in my ears. I told myself I'd keep going until I reached the road, but the road never came. After what felt like hours, I saw a faint light ahead, pale and yellow, flickering faintly through the trees. My chest loosened. Maybe a house, maybe someone who could help. But as I drew closer, my stomach turned. It wasn't a house. It was the cabin. My cabin. The light was from its window. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand. My footprints in the frost led straight to the front steps. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't backtracked. Yet here I was, right where I started. I don't know how long I stood there staring at it, my breath clouding in the air, my mind struggling to accept what my eyes saw. Finally, I forced myself to turn away again, to run in a different direction, not the path this time, but straight into the trees. Branches whipped my face, snagged my coat, tore at my hands. I pushed through until I stumbled into a clearing. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped, but then I saw them. Footprints, not mine. Bare feet, small and wide, pressed deep into the frost. They circled the clearing in slow, deliberate loops, and then stopped, at the center, at the exact spot where I now stood. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to confirm the sound behind me was real. The soft crunch of frost. The inhale that wasn't mine, but I did. And there it was, a figure, too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were studying me. No face, just the impression of one like the memory of a face smeared into shadow. It stepped forward, and I swear the frost didn't crunch under its feet. I bolted. No path, no plan. I just ran until my lungs burned, until my legs felt ready to give out. And then I was back at the cabin again. The light was gone now. The windows were black, but the door was open. I don't remember walking inside, but suddenly I was there, the floor cold under my boots. The air inside felt heavy, suffocating. I knew that if I stayed, I'd never leave again. That's when the whisper came. Not from behind me, not from any direction I could pinpoint, just everywhere at once. My name, drawn out, slow, as if savoring it, and then, stay. I don't know if I screamed. I don't know if my body moved on its own, but I remember falling to the floor, my vision swimming, my heart hammering so violently it hurt. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The cabin looked exactly as it had the day I arrived. My things neatly where I'd left them. My coat hung on its hook. No footprints on the floor. No sign of frost outside. I could have walked away then. I could have packed my bag and forced myself down that path one more time. But I didn't. Because I think I understand now. The cabin doesn't keep you here. It makes you want to stay. And tonight, I think I will. I haven't been able to sleep since. Not the kind of sleep you'd call rest. Sure, I've closed my eyes, drifted off for a little while here and there. But real sleep, the deep kind, the healing kind, feels like something I left behind in that cabin. Like a coat I forgot to take when I walked out the door. Most nights I just lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and that's when I hear it. Always at the same time. Always starting the same way. First, There's the faint creak like a floorboard shifting under the weight of something careful, deliberate. Then, the sound of breathing, not close enough to feel against my skin, but near enough that I know it's not coming from me. Steady, patient, waiting. The first few nights after I came back, I told myself it was just my mind replaying what happened. Trauma does that, right? It loops the worst moments, burns them into your brain, until you can't tell what's memory and what's imagination. But the problem is, this isn't a replay. It changes. It adapts. The third night, the breathing was closer. The fifth night, I heard the whisper again, my name dragged out, almost sung, with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. And last night I heard something else. Not words, exactly, but the sound of nails or claws dragging slowly across wood. The sound started at the wall near my head and traveled down, slow as molasses, until it reached the floor. I don't tell people about this, not really. I've hinted at it, I guess. I said things like, I've been having weird dreams lately, or this house makes strange noises. People smile politely, maybe tell me about some podcasts they heard, or a book I should read, but they don't know, and they wouldn't believe it if I told them. That's the thing you never believe, until it's you, until the sound is in your walls, until the shadow is standing just inside your doorway, until you feel that prickle at the back of your neck and realize it. Isn't fear making your skin tighten its attention? I think that's what the cabin does. I've thought about it a lot, turned it over and over in my mind, like a stone in my pocket. It doesn't just trap you there. It doesn't just haunt you when you leave. It notices you. It teaches you. And once it has you, it doesn't forget. Some nights, I get the feeling it's testing me, seeing how far it can go before I break. Sometimes the whisper comes from inside my closet. Sometimes it's from the kitchen, where I know I left the lights off, but now there's a faint yellow glow spilling under the door. I don't check anymore. I used to. I'd grab a flashlight or a knife from the drawer and force myself to look, because not looking felt worse. But then one night, I opened my bedroom door and saw frost thin and pale, curling like smoke along the hallway floor. I closed the door and locked it. I didn't sleep at all that night. The frost has shown up 3 times since. Each time it disappears by morning. I'm starting to think it's not a warning, it's an invitation. You want to know the worst part? Sometimes I want to go back, not because I miss it, but because I feel like I left something there. Like part of me is still sitting in that chair by the window, staring at the dark tree line, waiting for the knock. And if I went back, maybe I could put myself back together. Maybe I could end this dot. But then I remember the look of that figure in the clearing, the tilt of its head, the absence where a face should have been. And I know I wouldn't be ending anything. I'd just be finishing what it started. So I stay here. I keep my lights on at night, my bedroom door locked, my phone within reach, even though I know it won't help me when it matters. I keep telling myself I'm safe because I'm not there. But I think there isn't just a place anymore. You're probably wondering why I'm telling you this. Why do I even say these things out loud? It's because you need to know if you ever find that place, burn it. Don't go inside. Don't try to figure it out. Don't treat it like some adventure you'll tell stories about later. You won't come back the same, if you come back at all. I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying it because I'm already looking for someone else. It always is. And once it notices you, once it lets you see it, you're marked. You might walk away thinking you're free, thinking you outsmarted it, but you'll hear it. Maybe the first night, maybe years later, the creak, the breathing, the whisper. And when you do, you'll understand. People think horror is about the jump scare, the loud noise, the sudden movement, the thing that leaps out of the shadows. But the real horror is the waiting. It's the slow, steady realization that something is coming for you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. It's the sound of your own heartbeat when you realize you're not alone in the room. It's the knowledge that it doesn't need to rush, because it has all the time in the world. I think that's why I can't sleep. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I know is still out there. Somewhere in the dark, it's standing perfectly still, just listening, waiting for the right moment. And when it comes, it won't need to knock this time. I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this. I don't know how many more nights I can lie here listening to the breathing, the scratching, the quiet hum of something I can't see but can feel in my bones. Some nights I think about giving in, just unlocking the door, just letting it happen. Maybe that's what it wants. Maybe that's the only way to make it stop. But then I remember your face, the way you're looking at me right now. You think I'm warning you, and I am, but I'm also asking you to remember me. If you hear about a cabin deep in the woods, the kind that doesn't show up on any map, the kind that people talk about in low voices, remember my story. Remember what I told you. Don't go looking for it. And if it finds you, run, if you can. You've been quiet this whole time, just sitting there, listening to me spill everything I've been carrying. Maybe you've been nodding along. Maybe you've been shaking your head, telling yourself none of this could possibly be real. I used to think like that too. But once you've felt something breathing in the dark with you, once you've woken up and absolutely know that something else is standing in the room, you can't ever go back to being that kind of skeptic again. If you've ever had a night like that, a night where you knew you weren't alone, tell me. Write it down. I read every single message, every single story, because, well, sometimes the only way to feel sane again is to know someone else has felt it too. Have you ever heard footsteps when you knew there shouldn't be any? Have you woken to a voice calling your name and then realized it wasn't coming from the direction of your door, but from somewhere closer? If you have, you're not alone. And if you haven't, don't assume you're safe. That's what I thought. I thought strange things only happened to other people. People in far-off towns. People in the middle of nowhere. But evil doesn't care about geography. It doesn't care about time zones, or streetlights, or whether your doors are locked. If it wants you, it will find a way in. So tell me your story below. Even if it's just a flicker of shadow that made no sense, or a knock on your window when you live 3 floors up. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it's the start of something you won't be able to stop. I'll be here, listening. Just remember one thing before you hit play on the next story. Don't do it alone. Not tonight. Not after this.